Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, April 9th, 2022, and today we're going to be taking a look at the state of Maryland and the brand new congressional map that Governor Larry Hogan, a Republican, just signed into law a few days ago, signifying that this state is moving in a different direction when it comes down to congressional map making and congressional gerrymandering. Now, the state of Maryland is one of the most gerrymandered states across the nation. This is the map that has been utilized for the past 10 years, and taking a look at it, you can see just how insane many of these districts are intentionally drawn. For instance, this is the 3rd district here, held by Representative Johnson Barnes, and you can see that while he is winning by 40 percentage points, it is cracking in and out of different regions of the state in an effort to capture in a significant chunk of the vote. When you take a look at the neighboring 7th district, you also see the same type of thing occurring. You take a look at the 2nd district, you see it happening again. You look at the 4th district, it happens again. You look at the 5th, you look at the 6th, you look at the 8th. The only district out here that seems to be, Republican territory is the 1st congressional district. However, when you take a look at a county map across the state of Maryland, you will find that this state actually isn't as blue on the western side as you might think. Taking a look at previous elections, I'm going to actually show you the state of Maryland because it will tell you a bit about our state's composition. You actually find that there is a good amount of red on the outskirts and on the eastern side, and a little bit more blue concentrated within the middle of the state. But for every single district west of, the 1st congressional district to be blue, definitely tells you that there's something off about the map, especially considering that there is a good amount of red and a pretty significant chunk of our state here that should be at least competitive, that has solid blue districts any type of way that you cut it. And that's just the way that the Maryland Democrats ultimately wanted to proceed with over the past 10 years. And it actually was even more of a gerrymander compared to years past. Democrats have been known to gerrymander the state of Maryland for quite some time. I mean, take a look at the 3rd district before, right? You're talking about exceptionally small connection points and sometimes not even real connection points between the 2 congressional districts. I mean, what you're finding is that some of these districts went up and around and intentionally tried to draw out different versions of different constituencies in order to win their elections. Then came the congressional redistricting, in which the Democratic Party realized we have such a significant portion of the vote chunked up in the 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th district. Why don't we get rid of this Republican stronghold district? Why don't we turn it into a solid blue district? And thus, that incumbent was ousted. Take a look at the 2010 victory. 28.3% for this Republican incumbent. 2008 was a blue wave year by every stretch of the margin. Even the 1st district here went blue. But what you find is that the 6th district still went to the Republican Party by 19 points. 2010 versus 2012, the 6th district, 28 points more Republican than Democratic. Then it becomes 21 points more Democratic than it does Republican. You're talking about a 50-point swing across the congressional district. And it doesn't just happen for random reason, it happened because of gerrymandering. And if you thought the Democratic Party wasn't going to go further than this, you would be wrong. In the map that had passed previously, the one that was enacted by the General Assembly that was not signed into law by Governor Larry Hogan, the map got worse for the GOP in every single way. What had happened was that the Democratic Party abandoned their old map. Instead of continuing the status quo, maintaining it, they decided to take a jab not only at the 6th district, but also the 1st district, Andy Harris's district. Under the old map, this district has a partisan lean of Republican plus 28. Under the new but now thrown out map, it had a partisan lean of Republican plus 8. You're talking about a 20-point shift in a district that, sure, likely would have still elected a Republican, but makes it better for the Democratic Party because that means in a blue wave year, Democrats could potentially win here. When you take a look at the old congressional districts, let's take a look at maybe Oklahoma, for instance, a state where there's all Republicans, but there was one district that went to the Democrats back in 2018. It had a partisan lean of Republican plus 11. That went blue in 2018. There's nothing really saying that that old Maryland map could have gone blue, could not have gone blue in 2018 or a circumstance very similar to it. When you take a look at that, previously enacted proposal, it becomes very evident that the Democratic Party intentionally cracked the 1st district to include parts across what we would call in Maryland the Bay Bridge, or what is called the Bay Bridge. It covers over the Chesapeake Bay, but it's essentially, it connects a different region of the state to the easternmost part of the state in an effort to draw in all of these Democratic voters, because over here, where my mouse is pointed, all Republican voters through and through, right? You're looking at solid red districts. But when you take a look at the region that they wanted to capture in, you see blue. You see more blue. You see why the Democratic Party decided that this was the way that they were going to go. While it did technically weaken 2 of the incumbents here, these are still Biden plus 15 districts or more. They were not going to be competitive for the GOP unless we saw some type of super substantial shift nationwide, because keep in mind, this partisan lean is relative to Democrats winning the popular vote nationwide. So if anything, it actually is more Democratic than this is letting on. But the 2nd and 6th districts would have been fine for 2022. The 1st district likely would have been fine for the GOP, but let's say we return in 2026, and it's a blue wave year, a Republican one in 2024, the 1st district very well could have gone blue. So what happened was that a Democratic-appointed judge, one who was appointed by Governor Martin O'Malley, I believe, decided that this map right here was unconstitutional, saying that it was an intentional gerrymander to dilute Republican Party voters. Now, Governor Larry Hogan has been making it very clear for quite some time that he does not support the gerrymandered map. He had gone out against it multiple times, and people thought that because the court systems in the state of Maryland were largely Democratic and largely Democratic governor appointees, that it was never going to get to a position where it needed to be elevated to the Maryland Court of Appeals, which is overwhelmingly Republican. And what happened was that the state of Maryland ultimately found that there were actually judges who might have been Democratic and might have been, part of, big institutions. And actually, I think the judge that struck this down was a former Democratic senator's chief of staff. When you get into a judge position, you are no longer at the beck and call of these governors or these legislators, because you are now in a position where they can't get rid of you. So knowing that, the court and the judge decided that this congressional map in specific was wrong and a gerrymander, and they struck it down. And Larry Hogan called it a tremendous victory for democracy. So what they did was said, you need to draw a new map. And they did. The Democratic Party drew a brand new map that had passed in their General Assembly, but they needed a map that was cleaner, more efficient, and looked nothing like the old map or the new one that they had proposed. And now they're using this new congressional map that is much cleaner, more effective, more competitive, and more representative of the state of Maryland entirely. There are still hints of gerrymanders occurring. When you take a look at this 6th congressional district, it now has a partisan lean of Republican +1, meaning in 2022, David Trone is likely to go. This individual district is likely to go red in 2022, just simply based off of the new district that it has now been drawn in. We will actually see what happens in this congressional district, but it is interesting to note that it goes from being a district that was Democrat +16 to now Republican +1. Not because the Democratic Party decided that it should be that way from the start, but rather because they went too far in terms of what they actually expected to happen. And at one point, they even recommended a map that was even more extreme that would turn that 1st district from Republican +28 to Republican +1. It would have been a very interesting type of proposal that the GOP could have put forth. I don't think it would have, ended up surviving at all, considering that the map that was more beneficial for the GOP survived. But this map has been signed into law by Governor Larry Hogan, and it doesn't look like it's going to be contested on any further level. So what it did was turn the 1st district from Republican +28 to Republican +25. Nothing really changing there. What it did also was turn the 2nd district into a Democrat +11 district and the 3rd into Democrat +14. These two are not going to be competitive, but they are closer than they were before. The real change here is David Trone's district. Again, you're talking about a 15-point shift because the Democratic Party went too far in their initial map. I mean, a lot of this could have been prevented. The same way in North Carolina, the striking down of that map could have been prevented, or in Ohio, what is likely to be a stricken down map for future elections because of the margin that the Democratic and Republican parties decided to gerrymander over their opposing sides. Now that we are in a position where, this court is saying you need to draw a fairer map, the Democratic Party is starting to get a taste of their own medicine, what they have done in other states in terms of contesting congressional maps, contesting gerrymanders, which I definitely think that everyone, should be okay with, contesting maps that aren't representative. I just think that generally speaking, we should try to find a fair way to go about it. But, looking at the map that is now coming out of the state of Maryland, the Democratic Party actually runs the risk of losing a congressional district. When you take a look at the change from the old map, despite the Democratic Party having a supermajority in the state assembly and in the state senate, what you find is that Democrats actually lost a Democratic-leaning seat. It goes from 7 Democratic-leaning seats to 1 Republican-leaning seat to 6 to 1 to 1. And that's why I think Democrats should look at this and say, maybe in future redistricting years, if we don't know the courts are going to be on our side fully, don't go too far. Because going too far is exactly what caused this map to end up in the first place in a position where it was struck down. And looking at the nationwide change, plus 10 Democratic-leaning seats, minus 6 Republican-leaning seats, minus 5 highly competitive seats. That used to be plus 11, minus 6, and I believe minus 4 highly competitive seats. So all around, I mean, there isn't a super significant change nationwide, but it is a change that needs to be recognized. The Democratic Party is no longer in Maryland where they were previously up 7 to 1. They can no longer rely on that, and now they will need to contest these races and potentially spend upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars on a race that they otherwise would not have had they just maintained the status quo. I mean, this map very well could have been contested and was contested by many Republican opponents, but the courts decided, or at least did not take the case, or at least people thought that there would not be a successful bid to overturn this congressional map. Many states have overturned congressional maps in the middle of an election cycle. Pennsylvania did it in 2018. Florida had changed their congressional districts before. So looking at the state of Maryland, it is interesting to see that this map was able to hold up, or at least wasn't contested to the same extent. I'm not entirely sure the whole court background on the old congressional map. But for the new one, at least the revised one, the Democratic Party, I think, very well could have maintained the status quo, but because they went so far, they were now at the, they are bent to do whatever the courts have asked. And they've asked that there are cleaner districts, fairer maps, more competitive ones, and this is ultimately what they were put forward with. So, I also have some good news on my own side. I am now back in Maryland's 5th Congressional District. For a brief period of time, I moved over into Anthony Brown's district, if you want to take a look at what actually happened there. When you see, I was in the 5th District on the old map because it captured in different parts of, the near Annapolis area. I was in this district here. But then what you find is that they actually cracked it right here. And if you want to know something interesting, the new legislative boundaries on this map, again, one that did not end up going through, it actually cut me down my road, meaning the people down the street from me and across the street from me were in the old 5th District. Whereas I was right over here, right on one of these cracks. I mean, it literally seemed intentional. Obviously, it wasn't, but, losing your congressional district for whatever reason, I have sentimental value with it. So, moving over into the 4th District, I was saying to myself, how did this even happen? And why does it seem so perfectly calculated? Obviously, it wasn't intentional, but I am now happy that I am back in the 5th Congressional District, and it is a district that is much more compact, much more, cleanly cut, especially looking at many of these other districts. I mean, just looking at the old map again, looking at some of these districts, you're talking about egregious and insane gerrymanders. It is very nice to see now that they are no longer in such a fashion. I will also say that it is more indicative of where our map is right now. What you find is that there are red pockets within some parts of the state that are now reflected in the new congressional map. You have Eastern Maryland, you have Western Maryland, and you also have different pockets within 2 districts here that have a bit of Republican support that might otherwise not be seen on an older map such as this one, where everything western of, the 1st Congressional District is solid blue. It really just is nice to see that we now have a congressional map that is fairer and, more competitive, more cleanly cut. But I will say, the Democratic Party very much brought this on themselves. The purpose of this video is to show you that, yes, Maryland is changing their congressional map, but also to highlight that situations such as this are avoidable. Looking at the state of North Carolina, what you find is that the old map held up in court was actually drawn and forcibly drawn by a Democratic majority court. They only gave the Democratic Party 5 congressional districts. Because the Republican Party decided to go further in favor of a gerrymander beyond this map, the courts ordered a new map that was proportional, and Democrats now have nearly equal footing to Republicans in terms of overall congressional districts. It's very interesting to see how, courts sort of punish political parties for going to extremes and proposing extreme gerrymanders. But I honestly think, at some point, many of these judges are getting fed up. They're saying, this is something I can't agree with in conscience, and, I need to go ahead and move forward and strike down this map, even if it opposes my own political party, which has been the case in Ohio, Maryland, and I'm sure other states that are yet to come. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today. Sorry, tomorrow.